Now, this is an interesting graph which tells us something about the public awareness of the problems in the sphere of money. Every now and then these two topics had dominated the mainstream media, the price of mineral oil and the costs for healthcare. Of course, for an economy that so much depends on mineral oil as ours and on healthy workers, these are certainly important items. Some may still remember the oil price shock at the end of the 70s. Since that time, every rise in oil prices was sensitively registered by the public opinion with great excitement. And the cost explosion for healthcare, which was noticed at the beginning of the 90s, has become a never-ending story in the media. Of course, a tenfold increase of health costs is a tough nut to crack. Compared to the excitement caused by these costs for the economy, it is surprising that the third development of costs, the capital costs or interest payments, had hardly ever become a topic in media. They never aroused public excitement, although one could imagine that the economy creaks under a burden that is more than twice as high as costs for healthcare and oil price together. No? All right, it's a taboo. Let's wipe it off. Quick! The Swiss professor Hans-Christoph Binswanger is one of the very few economists who recognized the connection between environmental degradation and the monetary system, and he said, 99% of people don't see the money problem. Science doesn't see it, economic theory doesn't see it, and the latter even declares it to be non-existent. As long as we don't see money management as a problem, there is no prospect of an ecological transformation of our society. Let's turn to the question how unemployment is affected by interest burdens. Here is the curve of interest revenues and their various ascending phases. The yellow curve represents them in absolute figures. The red line reflects their ratio to the gross domestic product, the economic output. Since the growth of the economic performance slows down with increasing interest charges, their proportion shoots up, and they rapidly decline when interest rates decrease. The proportion of interest charges shows the scope of the economy. We also observe that the proportion of interest charges goes on to increase after a short decline. This is the consequence of the fact that the advantage of increasing interest returns will be swallowed by excessively rising debts. While this advantage had a positive effect during the first decade after the war, which even contributed to a gradual elimination of unemployment, this is not so anymore. Today, unemployment increases and could only be reduced for short periods by cuts in wages. The cake can be divided only once, and if the monetary capital and with it the burden of debt interests grows faster than the economic output, then the other side will receive a corresponding smaller share. The state, which was able to finance the social net and support the unemployed, is increasingly incapable of doing so. For one thing, because its revenues drop when companies go bankrupt or have lower turnovers. On the other hand, because the increasing number of unemployed and growing social tensions cause higher costs. These costs are not bearable any longer, and an attempt has to be made to reduce these costs, because they are nagging on the reserves. A comparison of various developments in the economy between 1991 and 2001 may give an idea about the dilemma. During that decade, the overall increase of the domestic product was 37%. That's the basic measure, for if the output grows by 37%, then all wages, all profits, the revenues of the state, all that can also grow by 37%. But what happened? Firstly, net wages have grown only 23%. Gross wages too remained 1/5 below the measure. Even incomes from entrepreneurial activity and from fortunes were lagging behind, which reflects the precarious situation of enterprises. They fight difficulties and their fears of bankruptcy, and many do go bankrupt. Only the state could slightly increase its revenues above proportion. But what goes beyond any scope are the interest revenues of banks with 89%, and along with them the augmentation of monetary assets by 99%. That means a doubling of monetary assets within 10 years. This might be seen as a slight slowing down of their growth, because the average in the previous decades was a doubling of monetary assets every 8 to 9 years. The insane augmentation of monetary assets can only be stopped if the holding of money can be prevented. This is also a question of the juridical assessment of money. Primarily, it is to be considered a public medium for exchanging goods and services by steady circulation, a public institution which should be open for usage by everyone and must not be blocked by anyone. Regarding money as a private commodity and keeping it as one likes could be compared to a driver who parks his car as he likes in the middle of a road, thus obstructing the ongoing traffic. Unlike the car driver who would receive a severe penalty for his inappropriate behavior, the money holder is seduced by a reward to feed his money back into circulation. Money is the most important medium in the economy which enables and sustains the exchange of services and goods. But still today, anyone has the right to block the flow of money without being made liable for the damage to the economy. The picture of this gear mechanism might be useful for summarizing the whole situation. The left part shows the cycle in the monetary sector, and the right side is divided into an upper and a lower semicircle representing the real economy. In the money sector, monetary assets over-proportionally grow with an annual growth rate of 7 to 8%, and the bank towers in every metropolis around the world grow higher and higher. The mass of monetary assets accumulates there and has to be serviced. This requires a corresponding infrastructure. Consequences the expansion of credits to the economy. Consequences again are higher interest burdens which have to be worked for in the economy. The interest flows to monetary assets increase and monetary assets grow. This is the vicious circle which our monetary system is based upon. The consequence is that ever higher interest payments leave less for others. Wages and profits decline, and their consequences are bankruptcies, poverty, unemployment, rising prices, strikes, violence, in short, growing social tensions. And when these build up, which is inevitable with continuous redistribution, the kettle will burst. Civil wars, revolts, general strikes or whatever might arise up to wars. So far, the way out of the dilemma was continuous economic growth. We have been trying to deal with these tensions by baking ever bigger cakes. But this way out through continuous economic growth is a dead end because of the finiteness of the earth and its resources. From this development too result growing tensions which already led to conflicts of interests. The conflict arises about the rights over the last resources which are bound to become scarce by time. This will not be solved without wars, as we have already witnessed at the Gulf, and in the near future there will probably arise conflicts about drinking water. Well, that is the situation now, which from both sides runs in a disastrous direction. What can be done? How can the disaster be avoided?